Hey, I'm going to go ahead and bring my guest Glenn in, and we can at least be chatting. Hey, Glenn.
Hey David, how's it going?
We are in an age where I feel like I would give myself a C plus to a B when it comes to technology. And there's something about Be Live, which we're coming through on, that everyone says Be Live is the easiest one. And I can't tell you what a victim I feel that I can never get Be Live to work. And it's every friend I know is like, it's so easy, but yet I'm always challenged. But I'm so glad to be here with you.
I am glad to be here with you too. Yeah.
We're going to give people just a couple of minutes to sign on and find us because I'm sure they were looking before. So, folks, when you come on, say hello. Tell us who you are. Tell us where you are. Always nice to have some context. Let me see if I can pull things up on my phone. Diane says, hi, Glenn and David. Hi, Diane. Good to see you. Hey, Sharon. Sharon's in Midland, Texas. My Siri, whenever I start talking, my Siri wants to answer. So, Glenn, where are you coming to? Where are you at in the world right now?
I am in Nashua, New Hampshire. So
New Hampshire.
Coast. Yep. See a Massachusetts portion, Connecticut, some of the New England represented there. So Maine. So yeah, New England's getting some representation. So
very good. Virginia, New Orleans. Very good. I'll let people come on and find their way. I'm glad you're finding us.
It's always interesting to me how small the world can be when we can connect through the internet, and we can have people from all over the world just come in. And in this time where people are all confined to their homes and for safety, and we're living in this I don't know, I guess Twilight Zone world that we're in right now, and yet we can all connect and find a way to be together. And I think that that's the blessing of our technology, that even if it can be frustrating, it can certainly offer us a lot of opportunity and hope for that. So
absolutely. And I think about that the things we complain about, that like, oh my goodness, it took us 3 extra minutes to connect with people all around the world.
Yes.
Let's see. Terry from Indiana, Sharon, Michigan, Judy in Minnesota, wonderful. Carol, Toronto, Columbia, Ohio, lovely. I'm so glad you guys are coming on and joining us. I'm here with the amazing Glen Lord, who's a wonderful friend. So, Glenn, one of the traditions I have is just, if we can, just take a moment. I always like to take a moment to just send love to those who aren't with us physically anymore, to those who have died, and those who live in our hearts. So if all of you would join us if you want, we'll just take that moment. Thank you. I was rushing here, Glenn. I went in this craziness. I decided bike riding would be a good thing. And I went to get my bike fixed. And I actually looked at my son David's bike, who had died. And I kind of went, I wonder, should I get that fixed and ride it? Because like they've all got flat tires now. It's been years since they've been ridden. And I was like, no, I don't know if I'm supposed to, if I should. So I brought my old bike in to be repaired. And the guy's like, this bike's not repairable. Do you have another bike? And I'm like, I guess I'm supposed to be on David's. And I just got in from riding his bike. So
I love those connections. That is so special, and especially where it was you were kind of not embracing it to begin with, but the universe decided.
I didn't know. I was sort of like, I don't know. And yet the universe helped me make the decision, or David did, or who knows. But it was sweet to ride his bike. So in that moment just then, I was like, David, I'm on your bike. I'm thinking about you and hope he's thinking about me.
I believe he is. I believe he is.
So, Glenn, you and I met at Compassionate Friends.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. We're both bereaved fathers, and that is what brought us together. So, yes.
And you are also a bereaved sibling.
Yes, a bereaved father. My son Noah died in 1999 from complications of a tonsillectomy, and my sister died in 2017 from metastatic breast cancer. So, experienced both loss of a son and a loss of a sibling.
Wow. So, how has life been for you? How do you cope with those losses? How
And,
do you also, and then I'd love to sort of hear, and what's it like now in the pandemic?
well, when you ask how do I cope with it, it's kind of an interesting question because here I am 20 years out. So it's I'm living in a different world from when my son died at 21 years this June. So he was only alive for 4.5. So he's been dead for many more years than he was ever alive. But yet, what has happened is he lives in my heart, and so but that's a journey that I've come to. It took me. Now I am at this place, and in this journey, I'm very comfortable with that, and I feel a really strong connection with him. And it is in today's world, it is about that love and that connection and the meaning that you talk about in your book about finding the meaning about where that is, and that's how led me to, be involved in a lot of grief work and helping others find their purpose and meaning and hope. But in the beginning, there was a lot of being lost and a lot of confusion and a lot of difficulty, and finding a group, the Compassionate Friends, to have a place to share with other peers, with people who, it's kind of interesting because initially you say, well, you can't understand my grief unless you've lost a child. And you come to realize, I think, through the experiences, truthfully, you can't understand anyone else's grief, but
Right.
you come to know that you actually understand that you can't understand. And through that, you can connect and empathize and really share, and you can share your loved one and really find people where you can connect and grow and still have a relationship that you have anyway, but have it with those around you also. So that is that. And with my sister, death is much more recent. It's 3 years now. Truthfully, it was very hard for me to separate that out. I don't know that you and I have ever talked about this, but 7 days later to the day, literally the night of my sister's funeral, my dad died. So
Mm.
I experienced both the death of my sister and the death of my dad within a 7-day window. So it took a while to separate out what was what and who was who, and how all of those connections have come together. And with that, I've really come to kind of some of the experience that I had of really looking to connect with them and allow myself to be honest about my feelings and feel what I felt. I've come to where I'm pretty comfortable connecting with both of them. Although I will say that at this point, my dad is really probably the loss that probably affects me most profoundly, in the sense that I feel there's all of these things I would love to talk to about. I feel like the older I get, the more there's life that I feel like I understand his perspective, and I feel like if I could just go talk to a younger me, I would really be able to understand. I'd love to share that with him, and I can, I can't do that, and that can cause pain at this point. But I think I'm connected. To me, it's about the connection. It's about that continuing bond, and it's about incorporating um, incorporating them into your life. Not, people talk about getting over it. It's not about getting over it. It's about including them. It's about having them be part of who you are, and coming to recognize and understand that, and understand what that does and how that, and in my mind, how you become more. You take the best parts of them, and they still affect you and grow and change, and it's an alive relationship. It's different, but it's alive.
So I have a few questions about that already. Um, The first one is about time. You know, we all, I think, agree there's no timeline in grief,
Yeah.
but time is a factor.
Yes.
And, you know, one of the reasons I wanted to also have you on, and I talked to the group about this yesterday. I'm afraid in our world, there's going to be a lot of newly bereaved people.
There will be.
And, you know, those of us, I say if you're in your first year, I'm not talking to you. But, and it's different for everyone. For some, the first year, that feeling of being able to reach out just a tiny bit might be at 8 months. For other people, it might be at 3 years. But I think we are going to have to be elders. And I think of you as one of my elders, not in chronological time in terms of age, but I think of you as one of my elders in grief, someone who's been down this road of a child dying longer than I have. Noah is your son, correct?
Yeah, Noah. Yes.
You know, I thought that was such an important point you made. I could talk to you for hours. I could learn about your life. I will never know what it's like for Noah to die. And you will never know what it's like for David to die.
No.
And I think there is I don't know what the word is, a comparison that people get into that I don't feel serves us in our grief. What do you think of that?
I would very much agree, because the way I see it is that the greatest grief is my grief.
Right, right.
And that,
The worst grief is yours, like exactly, right?
And I don't mean mine, Glenn's. I mean mine, the universal mine. And the greatest grief is the mine of wherever I am in my life, and it changes whatever that greatest grief is. And so, to me, it's not about whether one is bigger or lesser or connected. It's all about the love that we have with the individual, and that's what the fundamental foundation of grief is really based in that love. And so, it is about, and I think that when we can step away and not have that comparison, and realize that what I'm witnessing, and that's really what I would see, is I'm witnessing your experience of your love for David, and you're witnessing my experience of my love for Noah. And that love can also bring us pain when they can't physically be there, when our lost expectations, when our dreams are changed, when all of our hopes are not there. And we have to come to understand, what does our world look like? What is our reality at that point, and how do we incorporate that reality into us? And by witnessing it and being able to, sit in the mud with you and not try to pull you out of it, and not try to force you to stay into it, but allow you to be there, with you. When you're ready to walk out of it, also be ready to walk out of it with you, and recognizing that you may take one step only to be right back in the mud, and that's okay too.
Right, right. I think it's such an interesting road that none of us would ever want to be on or choose to be on. And yet we are here. And it is a time to, I feel more than ever, this is a time we have to at least virtually hold hands.
Yes.
That it's going to be a challenging time. And so many people, there's something about the flip side of what we're talking about is grief. If you don't know what my pain's like, there's many people I work with, and I'm sure you do too, that they're trying to convince their loved one to get their pain. And grief is already such an isolating experience. And now we're physically isolating, that it does feel like an insult on top of an insult, but it is certainly a collective insult. It's not just happening to me. It's not just happening to you. It's happening to everyone.
That is true, but I guess I think back to my early grief, And to me, in my early grief, my world became very small.
Right,
The
right.
world didn't extend really much beyond myself. And so everything was only happening to me because I was the world. And I don't mean that in an egotistical sense. I just mean that I was so incapable of seeing anyone else's perspective, so incapable of recognizing or connecting. So I think that, especially for people who are in the early level of grief, that even though we are universally experiencing the pandemic and we are universally experiencing that isolation, there's an additional isolation that goes on to it, because you and I are able to look around and say, this is happening to the world. And on a logical level, I believe people who are newly in grief logically can say, yes, this is happening to the world. But in an emotional level,
Right,
that's got to be very challenging.
right. And I always say that first year, whenever I cough, I want to say it's not a corona cough, but uh, and there's moments where I go, is that a regular cough? But I do talk about, and I feel this way. I tell people that acute phase, which is different for everyone, whether it's the first year, first 2 years, it really is a time for self-love, self-care, self-centeredness, even selfish, that it is the time you have to attend your grief.
Yes.
It is a time, one, I don't even know that you're capable of attending to the world. You
No.
know, you're really
Talk might be a challenge.
just, taking care of you is the challenge. So many people are here. I want to take some questions in a moment if you're up to that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just want to comment on something you said for a moment here. Is
Sure.
there will be a whole lot of new grievers, and many of them will be tied into coronavirus. However, there's also many others who are just dying because people die, and they're dying in
No
a
one
world
can't
where
have those
um,
intakes.
you're a funeral is not a funeral. It's limited to 10 people, and two of them are working for the funeral home, and you're trying to decide who else you're going to be there, and then the people are there aren't hugging each other, and the people who are your friends or neighbors. When Noah died and my sister died, there was this kind of group dynamic that came together, and that's not going to be there. And so I think that is universal for not people who are just individuals who are going to be affected by coronavirus, and there will be thousands upon thousands of family members affected there, but all of the others who are also going to be affected. And I think it's something that you and I and other leaders in the grief world have to ask ourselves: how do we address that challenge? Because it is going to be an additional complication to people's grief as we return to whatever normal is, and whatever that new normal is, it's going to have that additional complication in it.
And that's literally why we're here. I'll tell you, I started getting emails from people who were saying, they just couldn't attend their grief group that they rely on. And then a woman called and said her husband had died 2 weeks ago. She was so looking forward to starting grief group. He didn't die of coronavirus, but he happened to die 2 weeks before this. And she's isolated in her home alone after 40 years of marriage.
Yes.
And I'm like, what am I going to do? Like validate her feelings and go, oh yeah, that's very alone. I was like, no, we got to find a way to connect in this. We have to find a way to connect, even if it's, as I say, virtually holding each other's hands. We have to connect. And physical disconnection doesn't mean we can't do this.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I would challenge anyone who's listening to us now, who is a facilitator of a peer grief group, be willing to take the risk of doing a virtual meeting. I've been working with a lot of group leaders to run virtual meetings in a Zoom environment, and it's different. And in some ways it is much more challenging, but there are honestly some things that there's a unique environment there. I can show you what my child's room looked like to the entire group, whereas I can't do that if I'm in a room. And there's other advantages. So if you're a group leader and you facilitate, take the risk of running the because your people need this more than ever, and I think you'll find it's very rewarding.
And it's also, people say, I'm not good at it. This is one of those moments where me being technologically challenged, or everyone understands that. Like, no one's looking for perfection in any of this, so I go along with you. If you do it badly is better than not doing it.
Absolutely. And it's what is good. I mean, it's try to, sometimes I ask, people say, what can I do to support with someone? And it's really, it's be there with them. And since we can't physically be there with them, as you point out, we are blessed to live in a world where technology allows us to virtually be there with them. And even, simple things like, reaching out and letting people know they're special by doing things like writing a handwritten note. And right now the mail's still working, and to get something that says, I'm thinking about you, your matter, your loss matters to me, in a way that is, very personal. There's an intimacy when someone puts a pen to paper that says that, and it doesn't have to be a long thing. It can be a one paragraph, but it says that. And I think the more we can try to do these things, I think that's really important.
Absolutely. Let's look at some of these questions, if we may. Someone says, I'm so disappointed the Helping Parents Heal conference has been postponed. And not only that, I was doing the Compassionate Friends in Hawaii. That got postponed. Many of these. I hope to see you, David, at the long-term survivors of suicide in July. Yeah, I'm supposedly speaking. Fingers are crossed. And I think it's really important to remember in all this, this is temporary. One of the things I noticed for me is the people who called up about an event and said, it's canceled. Really, if there was something I couldn't put my finger on it that bothered me. And then other people who called up and said, it's postponed and let's do it in December. It was like, it was an affirmation that the world's going to go on. We're postponing it. We're not ending it. So I think whenever we can do those, that's really important.
Absolutely. Yes.
And Glenn, you can feel free to grab any of these too, if any of you.
Yeah.
So this woman says here, I can't see names on here well. Hang on, let me do it on my phone here and I can at least see names. Robin says, we Zoom every Wednesday in our bereavement group. That's wonderful. Donna says, I'm looking for a safe place together to know we're not alone. That's absolutely true. Oh, that was Diane that said the Helping Parents. Yes, those are losses in themselves that we don't get to connect around our children, around our losses.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it may have even been your article. Don't want to say for sure, but I read an article that it attributed kind of this entire experience of the pandemic as kind of a universal grief event. And
yeah, that was me.
Yeah, I thought so. I thought that it was.
I gotta tell you, it's so strange. It is for any of you, you can Google it. It's the Harvard Business Review. I was walking my dog. Scott, he called and said, hi, it's Scott from the Harvard Business Review. Can I just talk to you about, is this grief? And I said, sure. As I'm walking my dog, we had a 3-minute conversation. That article has now been shared 5 million times. In my whole career, it's the most viral thing I've ever had. And it's such a strange thing when you put years into a book and somehow like a 3-minute conversation goes viral. But it is what it is, and I'm glad it's helping people.
So there are a couple of questions there. Let's see. Glenn and David, any thoughts or advice for suicide survivors during the pandemic? Well, yeah, I think that one of the things to recognize is that this isolation that we're feeling is going to complicate things. And I think that, one of the challenges And I guess I want to be careful how I phrase this, but I think one of the realities of grieving is we have to teach those around us how to help us. It sounds cruel in many ways, but it's reality. And I think that part of the thing we can do is reach out to your support systems and let them know that you need additional help, that you want the additional support, that you're willing and able to take a phone call. And that's much more challenging because it's really hard to be the one to lift up that phone. If you know someone who's in that situation, lift up the phone and call them. Reach out to them, because I think one of the key elements here is finding ways. I have a friend who constantly chastises me about the concept of social distancing, versus physical distancing. And I think there's a real importance. Words have meaning, and I know that the big term is we're all calling it social distancing, but I think that is really so bad. It's physical distancing. We need to physically stay away.
Social. We're all being social right now.
Correct. And if you can take that time to reach out, I think it's really important. And it is harder. And the other piece is to, I think, acknowledge how it is you're feeling. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that we're all feeling, and it's there can be fear, there can be anticipation, there can be confusion. And I think it's all right to, I think one of the things that we need to do is allow ourselves to experience that and say, like you said, it's not permanent. Like this, I may take a moment where I'm sitting there wondering, how am I going to get the groceries that I need to, get in my house? And am I going to get infected when I go do that or whatever? But that's not every moment of your life. We have these other moments where we can sit here and watch a Facebook Live or, do something of that nature where we're not in the midst of that. And I think it's important to recognize some of those things.
One thing you just said that I want to go back to, luckily, it's one of my character defects that I have grown through. Some of them I still have, but this one, and I've had a lot of friends and people I knew growing up that are testers. And by testers, like a woman shared just in the past few days that her deceased husband's birthday is coming up in a few days. And she was wondering if anyone's going to reach out. And it's interesting because I can think of myself 20 years ago as someone who would have gone, yeah, let me see who's going to reach out. Test is on. And I've realized now that I want to, more than test anyone, because that's a wound, that's a character defect, more than test someone, I want to love myself enough to set myself up to win.
Yeah.
So I said to her, and I've learned to do this, to text people the day before and go, tomorrow's going to be a hard day. It's David's birthday. I hope I can reach out to you. So that, because what else happens is we broadside people. I catch someone as they're in line at the post office and go, hey, and they're like, I can't talk now. And then I get off the phone and I can go, can you believe John wasn't there for me on my son's birthday? Right? So we want to set people up. And as you said, as being deeply in grief, it feels unfair that we have to do that, but we're not doing it for them.
Right.
We're doing it for us to get support.
Well said. I want to so someone spoke. I did something along the lines of that they that they really don't want to be around people, and I want to talk a little bit about that for a moment too, because there's a difference between feeling lonely and taking time for yourself. And being in grief doesn't always mean reaching out is not always the right thing to do. And that is, again, being honest with where you're at. Sometimes that meditative, private time can also be very good, but it's a matter of being honest with whether or not it's loneliness and isolation or whether or not it's meditative, private time. And they both, from the outside, might look the same, but internally there's a difference. And one is healthy and productive can be very damaging.
And, I used to say this before the pandemic. Some people aren't group people. They're just not. They might have their one best friend. They might go to a therapist. Not everyone. And, there's been a million memes about this and quotes about how during the pandemic, uh, the introverts are just like home and thrilled, and the extroverts are going nuts. And, that's why no secret I'm connecting with people, because that's what I do in general. And yet, just like you said, some people might not be people who reach out this way, and some people might reach out this way because this is the only way to reach out now.
Yes.
So we have to organically deal with whatever we are.
Absolutely. Be ourselves and be honest and truthful with ourselves and be compassionate with ourselves.
Yep. Carla just said, be truthful to yourself.
Yeah.
And I just want to mention for Sammy, earlier today, I did a whole little mini session on death by suicide. So I hope you'll go back and check that out. Teresa, my oldest son died at 31 in an automobile accident 7 months ago. I hadn't seen him in 6 years due to my health. I feel such guilt. My heart hurts so bad. I miss him and need help.
Well, my heart goes out to you, and I would say that there's many things that you've mentioned in that statement. The one is the pain and the loss and the feeling of that is a reality of where you're at. But then the guilt is another piece of all of this, and guilt and regret can be something that can really plague us in our grief, because we can rewrite history in our minds, and we can redecide how and what maybe could have or should have happened, and we can punish ourselves immensely. And I think one of the things to look at with that is to be willing to be loving to ourselves and sit there and I think it's well, you and I have talked about Byron Katie, and for those of you who don't know the work of Byron Katie, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but it really is a matter of, I think, when you look at that, the guilt, there are things you can do to work with the guilt, and whether that is working with it yourself or working with someone to work through the guilt as a professional, maybe you work going to a counselor with that. The guilt doesn't have to be part of your life forever. The loss, the missing, that part that will be a part of you. That is something that you'll incorporate. But the grief is something that the guilt is something that can be addressed.
And I also think one of the things I notice about her statement, if I may, Teresa, is it's interesting. We have 50% of the side of the road is ours in any relationship. But when someone dies, it's interesting, we take 100. Yeah. You couldn't see him. Could he see you? So just know that for whatever reason, that is how that played out. And it's not all you, it's not all him. And the other thing is, I think in life, we all have issues. We have relationships that become challenged. We don't call each other. Things happen. We move far away. And we always think there's going to be time. So, I'm sure you didn't think he was going to die at 31. Why would anyone think that? And, it's like that, the Buddha saying about the problem is we think we have time. And we're doing the best we could. And you were doing the best you could. And he was doing the best he could. And no one knew death was around the corner. No. So I think it is a lot of self-love and compassion you have to find there. Donna says, I've learned the old me is gone, and I have learned to live my life differently now.
It is different. It is different. And I think that there's a lot of coming to grips with that different, because there can be a lot of of challenges in understanding what that difference is. But yes, it is. You know, sometimes I don't like the term new normal because I don't know what normal is, or if I had an old normal.
Right.
But you know,
Right.
it is different, and I think if we can embrace what that is, and look at it and say, you know, there's a beauty in what that is, and that doesn't mean that the pain isn't there. I mean, I want to be clear that you know, it's. I was struck at my sons would have graduated from high school about 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, and when his graduation date from high school approached, you know, it had been 15 years about when that happened, and yet still that I mean, it hit me hard. And so it's not that I'm not trying to say that it isn't that, but it's kind of like there's this pain and this joy, and the joy of the relationship overtakes and for the most part leads as you get further along in your grief.
And someone says here, I just wanted to read this one. Um, with grief, I've learned to be compassionate to myself. If I did one chore a day, I was exhausted, but I told myself, well done.
Well done. Absolutely. Well done. I would agree. And whatever that chore is, sometimes that chore is getting out of bed.
And Naomi says, today I texted a friend who had not reached out since the memorial a month ago. I let her know I was in pain and wanted to hear from her. She apologized and acknowledged that she had a hard time with death and grief. She took ownership of it. We had a great talk and felt good to share my needs lovingly and have them heard. I'm so glad she did that. I wrote about someone really dear to me that did not come to my son's funeral and told me later she just thought it would be too sad. And I just wanted to flip out and go, it was too sad. It absolutely was too sad. It's a funeral. It's not supposed to be a happy moment. I think, when did we get to a place where I'll come to your funeral, but it's not going to be sad, is it? Because I don't want to go to a downer funeral. And then after I got through that initial conversation, we didn't talk for months. Then when we talked again, I said to her, it so broke my heart. And she was really shocked that I even noticed she wasn't there. And she shared with me, much like this person, how she was in turmoil about her own pain around my son's death. And really, she was afraid of facing her pain and really did not think she would be noticed whether she was there or not. And I had to tell her, you matter, you were noticed. But it's so is important. I think we have those conversations whenever we can.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, there's one of the tragedies is that, you know, some of our previous relationships are not going to return because there are people who their own fear of what has happened, their own inability to express their own feelings and be honest with feelings will not allow them to connect. But there are other relationships like either where you reached out, where she reached out, where reaching out can you know, really repair a relationship that also has a great value. And those secondary losses, you know, are oftentimes part of a grief journey that, you know, we can't bring back our loved one, but in some cases we can repair those secondary losses.
And I think there is, you know, death and grief are a time of reevaluation. There's just people in my life that I was like, I think I'm done. I think I'm done. That relationship isn't serving me. And like you said, there's other ones like hers. I had to work on forgiveness and go, can I forgive her because of 20 years? It doesn't mean I have to forgive the action
Right.
of her not showing, but can I forgive her, the person?
Yes.
And it's, you know, those things are really challenging. I'll tell you one other thing I'd be interesting to hear your take on. Like I said, you're one of my elders. It was fascinating. Elder, not age-wise, grief-wise.
I'm not even sure age-wise, to be really honest with you, but we'll leave that for another time.
I'll leave that for another time. I was at an event and I had two good friends next to me. And at this event, someone came up to me who had not called, texted, reached out ever after my son died, and knew my kids and knew me, and we had worked together and had thought, as friends, we weren't like seeing each other all the time, but nothing. So he walks up 2 years later at a public event and says, I just want you to know I haven't reached out, and I just wanted to say how sorry I am. Your son David died. And I said, thank you, I appreciate that, and chatted for a few moments, and then he walked away. The person to my left went, how courageous that he did that. The person to my left went, it's been 2 years. There's nothing courageous about that. He just did that for him. And I remember going, I can't even go into the assessment of it just because I didn't even want to go there. But it was interesting to think about how my friends took literally two polar opposites of that situation.
And I think oftentimes that there's truth in both statements. It was courageous for him in the sense that he obviously had something that stopped him from doing it before. Whatever that was, there was something in him that had not allowed him to go forward and do that. And he overcame whatever that was to do that. And then on the other side of it all, it's like, you're sitting there saying, you're accepting this and allowing that to happen. I mean, I saw someone said, I still have grudges against some of the people that, walked away. And I think that it's anger and those grudges can be a natural part too. And I think it's like, in some cases you build those relationships again. In other places you say, you know what, I can forgive you, but I can also, and I'm forgiving you not for you, but for me, because I'm not going to punish myself with my anger and my frustration at you. But in that forgiveness, you can live your life there and I will live my life here. And it's sometimes that doesn't, forgiveness doesn't mean that we're going to repair it. But I think in both cases, it could be courageous for you and courageous for him, depending on which side of the coin you want to sit on.
And it's interesting. It's I think back on those two people in my life, and my friend who said, oh my gosh, I'm just heartbroken that you even noticed I wasn't there. And she said to me, the idea that I can get choked up just saying this. She said to me, this is the woman who didn't attend the funeral. She said, the idea that I might have caused you any pain in that moment just breaks my heart. Because she said, the last thing I would want to do is cause you any pain in those moments. On the other hand, the person who walked up to me at the public event, I kind of felt like when he did come up, whether it was courageous or not courageous, I didn't feel it was about me.
And you don't know.
Never really said, now that I'm here, I just, I want to see you, or I want to do something, or I want to,
Absolutely.
how's your other son? So it's interesting. And then I had a birthday, and it was important for me to have that birthday. And it's interesting, I invited her, but not him, because I kind of feel complete with him.
Well, absolutely. And I think one of the things we have to do, you started off earlier by saying sometimes we feel, especially in that early grief, we can feel kind of selfish or feel kind of like we're, being, self-centered and things of that nature. And I don't really think that's true. I think honestly what happens is we break down all of those barriers that says to ourselves, I owe it to this person to make it okay for them. And you don't. And if we don't want to do something to hurt ourselves and attack them, but at the same time we don't owe them anything. And if their relationship was one that had a time and place, and it may have been beautiful for that time and place, it also may be done, and that's okay too.
Right. I agree. Well, we're kind of out of time here. I so appreciate you being here. Tell us, for people who want to find you and know more about your work and who you are and all that, how can we find you?
Probably the best way, if anybody wants to email me, you can email me at glenn@thegrieftoolbox.com, or you can message me at the Grief Toolbox. There's the Grief Toolbox Facebook page. I do a lot of different work, but that's probably the most public one that I do. So please feel free to reach out with me at messaging me there, or directly email me. Either way would be great.
And I'll tell you, I just want to say publicly to you what a personal gift you have been to me. That, when I was at Compassionate Friends after my son died, I was there a year before I spoke there, and I really wanted to go there, not as the grief expert, but as the father. And you were someone who made a point of connecting with me, and we've gone on to have many conversations about a lot of different things. And I'm so grateful that you reached out and cared and took the time. So I just want to publicly thank you for that. So thank you for continuing.
Thank you, David. Thank you.
All right, Glenn, we'll be finding you at the Grief Toolbox. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. So for those of you who are, maybe this is your first time, know that I come on every day at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. I take a topic every day. We talk about it for about 15 minutes, take your questions. Then in the evening, not every evening, but we're trying to have different people on so that you hear from a lot of different voices. I know that, let's see, what day of the week is it? It is now, what day of the week is this now? That's our new world now. It's Saturday. Tomorrow night, Nancy Levin's going to be here. Nancy Levin at 5 p.m. Pacific time wrote an amazing book on boundaries that just changed me in so many ways. And so many of the things we were just talking about, where does my grief end and someone else's feelings, and how do we interact? And even in the pandemic, how do we deal with people who maybe don't care or aren't doing what we think they should be doing, or the health department thinks they should be doing? But all those issues that come up around boundaries. Nancy's a master, and she just helps me so much. So you're going to love hearing her talk about boundaries and grief. And so that will be Sunday. Monday night, Paul Deniston's going to do a little mini grief yoga chair class here. And then I think on Tuesday, we're going to have Bradley Vinson do something for grandparents. And then later in the week, we're going to have a friend of mine, Maria, who's got a wonderful book on dealing with the death of a spouse. She lost her husband. Her husband died a few years ago, and many of you know her. She is here on Fox TV in Los Angeles, and she's also been on things like Bruce Almighty. I saw her the other day. So she's going to be wonderful to talk about how to deal with the death of that significant other, your spouse, your romantic partner. So she will be here with us. Lots of amazing people. We want you to know during this time, we're physically distancing each other, but we're not disconnecting. And we are a community of grievers. And this is a blessing to me to do this. And I just thank you for sharing this. And I'll see you tomorrow. And I'll look forward to it. Anyone you know who's isolated in grief, please let them know about this. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here today.